Welcome to Bounce Back Stronger, the podcast that explores ways to find peace and purpose no matter what happens. Today's guest, Judith Bigham, is a master of blurring the lines between fine art and decorative art and is an inspiration for anyone seeking to use creativity to overcome loss. Judith is a graduate of the prestigious Rhode Island School of Design, and her eclectic life journey has taken her from the vibrant streets of New York City to the serene landscapes of the Pacific Northwest. After facing the sudden loss of her husband at the age of 49, Judith turned to her art for solace, ultimately forging a remarkable career as a muralist, printmaker, painter, and designer. Through her beautiful botanical paintings, she infuses love, passion, and audacious beauty, spreading light in a world that sorely needs it. But her story is not just about art, it's about resilience, rebuilding, and rediscovering purpose. So join us today as we unravel the inspiring narrative of this incredible artist, whose journey from grief to empowerment embodies the essence of bouncing back stronger. Judith, thanks so much for being with us today. I'm so excited to speak with you.
Thanks for having me, and I'm excited too.
I am just mesmerized by your art behind you. It's so beautiful.
Thank you. These are my recent pieces that I made I was at an artist residency in Rajasthan, India. So you're seeing just parts of them behind me right here.
They're
And
beautiful.
well, the colors of Rajasthan were incredible. And I think I said, as I was posting pictures of these, that my color sense got reprogrammed. I've always loved using color, but when you're in India and it's all about textiles there, and people wear these colors every day.
Yes.
They wear them all day, every day, doing everything. The baker, the tea maker, everything.
And so it must have been kind of a shock to come back and have the color change. And it sounds like you've held on to the colors that you picked up in India.
I think that what I really felt is that my color sense was reprogrammed, that it can't go back now.
Nice.
There's no way it can go back, because it's just as if something gets reprogrammed in you. There's a new program in there now. I'm not surrounded by it, but it did change me a lot.
Yeah. There's this new idea that things that we look at, so creativity, arts, beauty,
Mhm.
helps reprogram our brain. And it's interesting, you kind of just really led to that. It's called neuroaesthetics, and it's really helpful in mental health, in helping
Yes.
people kind of bring themselves out of difficult times. And you just kind of really described that, I think, in some ways.
Well, we are just sort of big computers, right? And they say we're
Yeah,
programming children. And then if those programs are problematic, we try to reprogram ourselves. So
that's right.
I do think of it as being reprogrammed, because I sort of had to reprogram myself through things that I've gone through in life. And I've used meditation, and they kind of say that meditation is like reprogramming your brain and bad patterns in your brain.
Yeah, befriending it to a certain extent, right? Understanding
Yeah.
where you kind of get stuck and
Yes.
then coming back. Yeah.
Absolutely right.
Oh, very helpful. Well, maybe you started to kind of touch on this is maybe talk about some of the pivotal experiences that you've had, and maybe in particular when you had a major loss in your life.
17 years ago, my late husband, I'm a widow, and it happened 17 years ago when I was 49. And he was a guy that did extreme sports, and he died windsurfing in extreme conditions on the Sea of Cortez in Baja, Mexico. He took
Mm.
risks all the time. I lived in a place in the Northwest where a lot of people were getting injured or dying. And it wasn't unfamiliar to me, except at this time it was my husband.
Right.
So the mostly men, but I know two women who passed away also. Took a lot of chances. I'm a person that doesn't like risk. I do love sports, so we were a good combination. And I was a stay-at-home mother. I had a very nice marriage. I was very lucky. I had a really nice life. So he died suddenly at 49.
Right. It's really hard.
And my kids were little girls, 9, 11, and 14. So I had to deal with that. I had to deal with my grief, my shock, their grief, also,
Right.
because they're children, that I had to rebuild my life. I was really unprepared
Yeah.
to take on the responsibility of doing the taxes every year, of taking care of
Right.
the home. So having to change and figure things out was absolutely shocking. It was really
Yeah.
shocking. And I try at this point, it's been 17 years, I try not to make that my story, although it makes me who I am today. I learned all these things because of that. So I had to be resilient. Luckily, I had my children and I knew
Didn't
other,
have any choice.
yes. And then that's what I would say to people. I would say, what
Yeah.
choice do I have? And actually, I sort of loved it when some people said, oh, you have a choice. You could be a mess. You could do this. You could do that, you know.
I think it's incredible. And we haven't talked about this because we just met, but about I guess it's almost 6 years ago, I was in a relationship with somebody and we were engaged and he actually died suddenly. He did go through a brief illness for 9 days, but then he died. So you did decide that you had to do things for your kids and you did those are big things. And I had the same kind of thing. I said, I have to do this. What else am I going to do? And that
Yes.
kind of can get us through it, I think, to a certain extent too. I think
Yes.
it's a bit of a coping thing.
It's
And
totally a coping thing. I had
yeah,
to take care of I had to take the dog for a walk.
that's right.
I couldn't wallow
Yeah,
because my youngest was 9. I had
yeah,
to get her in the bathtub at night. I had
yeah,
to go to a school conference. I had to, people say they dive into their work, and I guess that was my work at the time.
yeah. And what better work, right? To take
Yes.
care of your kids and getting them through it because it's not it has ramifications with kids. It continues, it kind of reverberates, I think. I don't
Oh,
know if you've experienced that. Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah. Yes, I have experienced it. It's funny. Someone said something to me 6 months after he died. Someone who hadn't experienced loss, and they said something like, "Everything okay? Everything back to normal now?" I
It's never
said,
normal. It's never
it's
normal.
never going to be normal. Do you
No.
understand? It's never going to be normal. It will be different, but it's not going to be normal. It's absolutely shocking. So I felt very lucky I had my children. We were all together in Mexico, and when they were pulling his body out of the water,
Mm,
we were in a very remote place, and his friends were there. And I was looking at him, and I didn't even go to him, but I turned around because my kids weren't with me. My kids were in the village. We were in this very small village, fishing village, and I went to my children because
mhm,
that part of my life was over.
mhm,
I went on instinct. I turned around and then we walked into the village to get my children. And I feel like that's the moment.
mhm.
That's the moment where my life changed. It was boom, I pivoted. And I pivoted. And from that moment on, it was different. And I had to think differently and be a different person. I don't want to be the person that says, like, oh, those are my glory days. He was perfect. And, because I want to be able to move on. My mother said to me, "You didn't have him as long as I had your father, but you have the chance to have another life with someone." And so
Yeah,
I,
that's a gift.
yeah,
That happened to me too. I had a woman at a retreat center actually say to me, she was from Sicily. She says, in my country, when the man dies, husband dies, women wear black for the rest of their life, and they
yes,
never go out and have life again. And she says, you don't have to do that. And you're young, you can still have a lot of
yeah,
happiness, which was such a gift because we do get in our heads about that. The aura of grief, what's the optics of it? And
yes.
it,
And
it
then
was
that
it was
becomes your
very
story.
freeing.
Yes, yes. And that's not my story anymore. It's not my daughter's story. And, it got me to a place. And then from that, I'm a different person.
Yeah. There's a phrase I use, and I'm just finishing this book, and we have to become more than what happens to us.
That's it. We
Yeah.
have to become more than what happens to us. And I did not want that to become my story, that I had the perfect marriage and the perfect person and the perfect, do you
Nobody's
know that
perfect
term?
for one thing.
No
But
one is exactly.
exactly. It's easy when you lose somebody to put them on a pedestal and make this whole thing, but it's important to kind of see the whole thing
Yes. And we
too.
did
I
have a
think it's
great,
helpful for us. Yeah,
yes. And I think my daughters are able to see that they're allowed to see him that way. But I have to put it in a different category as a person that wants to move on and have different relationships with people.
that's right. And it changes you,
Yes.
and so maybe let's talk about that. Like
Sure.
how did you move forward? Your art is behind you, so it
It,
kind of
it, will-
leads the subject
it
really
does lead
well.
this. I don't know what people, I think Misha said the same thing. Misha is a person that you interviewed, Misha Archer, the award winning illustrator.
Yeah.
And it's a friend of mine. We met when we were 13. And I'm 65, and we're still dear, dear friends. We both say, I don't know what people do. It's confusing to us when they don't have this in their life, this outlet to work and this passion to work. So for me, my children were my passion. And the second thing that happened was my artwork became my passion, and I had to start doing it every day. And at the beginning, I did these very grief-filled pieces, which
Mhm.
were, and they were really just for me. I found old maps in the car of his, and I stitched them together, and then I stitched words in them.
Mhm.
Like
Mhm.
I would write down phrases. Like one of my favorite ones is the elegant bravery of a tender heart. So I stitched them together in a very sloppy way. And everything's on my Instagram, and that's really the best place to look if somebody wants to look and see what is she talking about. And they're way back there, maybe like 9 years ago, scroll down. But there are these maps, and they're maybe like 8 by 10.
Mhm.
And I stitch pieces together, and I stitched them very sloppily, like a big Frankenstein stitch. And then I stitched words in them again, like kind of messy writing. You can read it, but it was things like that. And it took me so long because I'm stitching, I'm like doing embroidery, like on, somebody from a Jane Austen book. It takes so long to do it that it was very meditative. And I'm
But yeah,
meditating
exactly.
on these words, and
Yeah.
I'm making this artwork. And it was very sad, and it was very beautiful. And then I did a few of those pieces, and I felt like, okay, now I need to move on. So I probably did that for maybe the first year or so after
Mhm.
he died. I was probably mostly taking care of my kids, and then I did that kind of artwork. And then at a certain point, I thought, okay, now it's time to move on. I've got to do something different. And I started working. The best thing was I started working for an art consultant, doing all sorts of work for new public construction that was going up in Seattle. I was living in Seattle at the time.
All right.
And she had great taste, and she would just hire me. She would say, can you do this? She'd give me an image. Can you do something like this, but can you do it in red? And I'd say, yes, I can. I can do that. And I know some artists that can't do that.
Mhm.
And at the time, it was my best way to dive
Mhm.
back into my artwork was to have somebody else give me an assignment. And I felt lucky. I felt like I'm going to get paid for this. I feel like I'm in school and someone just gave me an assignment. It became a design dilemma. I'm really one for, and you said it in the beginning, mixing design and
Mhm.
art and not putting one on a higher level than the other.
Right.
I love wallpaper as
Mhm.
much as I love a beautiful painting. And I don't
Mhm.
know why we value a
One
beautiful
differently.
painting more than we do wallpaper or a beautiful sofa.
I agree.
So I
I
I
couldn't
did
agree
this.
more.
Well, and also it's, to me, it seems very democratic. Like, oh, everybody can see this piece, everybody can understand it.
Mhm.
And
Experience it. Yeah.
yes, experience it. I think I just lost patience for things that were very esoteric. And what's interesting is working for an art consultant, doing artwork for public places, condominiums, restaurants, office buildings. You had to communicate something. So
Mhm.
it really wasn't
A
about
feeling.
me. It was about
Yeah.
a feeling. It was about, and usually it was something nice. It was about, and nice
Mhm.
is a funny word, but it was about
Mhm.
beauty. It was inviting. You wanted it to be warm, inviting, so that everybody could understand it and everybody would enjoy it. So that was a
Right.
great place for me to be.
And that was
Instead
a
of
good
just
place for you
doing,
to visit, probably
it
too.
was a great place for me to visit because it wasn't
Yeah.
about me just pouring my emotions into something where I'm just getting deeper into the
Mhm.
sadness or the
Mhm.
grief or whatever it was. I'm making something to make somebody else happy. And I loved doing that. And then through that, I had a couple of assignments to do botanicals. And that just really resonated with me because I love the fact that it was using my imagination and also painting something that's also real that somebody could relate to.
Mhm.
I don't sit and paint like this is a dahlia. I make up every flower. So that flower looks like a dahlia, but maybe the stem will look different, or something next to it. Like these are fairly look like tulips, and that's kind of a dahlia looking thing. But
Mhm.
I don't always do that. I take a stem from this plant. I take a color from this plant. I take stamens and leaves from another plant, and I just put them all together. And I have great freedom from it. So
Yeah.
I started doing this and it made me really happy. And they were so pretty. And also at the time, and almost to this day still, I can't look at sad movies. I don't
Mhm.
like sad books.
Same.
I I just want to look at happy things. I just
Yeah, I
think
mean, somebody told me once, and I think it was maybe one of my writing coaches, and she said many people have a high tolerance for sadness and trauma,
mhm,
like trauma related media, but when you've had trauma in your life, you don't. I totally related to that. I don't need to bring more of that into my life.
got enough. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm good.
Or
I
yes.
believe it happens. I'm good. You know,
Yes,
that's kind of how
exactly.
I see it. Yeah.
Exactly. That's so true. That's really, really true. I believe it happens. I'm good. And I just sort of felt like the world didn't need any more of it. The world really needed more prettiness. And I also felt like with flowers, I really had this idea that it was this sort of trope. It was sort of this stereotype of women,
Mm.
mothers, older women painting flowers. And I thought, I'm going to own that. I'm going to take it
Hmm.
back and like turn it on its head
And you
because
have.
it's just a great thing. I love what's more beautiful. They're beautiful
Yeah, why
and
wouldn't I just make
they're
that mine?
colorful. Why wouldn't I make it mine? And why is it that we have such in the intellectual art world? Why do we have such a bad feeling? And why is it so frowned upon to have to say that work is beautiful or pretty? Oh, that's so
Mhm.
pretty. But you're not supposed to say. You're supposed to say, "Oh, that's deep and it means something." And I want to
Reason.
bring pretty back. I want to be able to say, "I like that painting because it's pretty. I like to be around it. It speaks to
Yeah.
me. It's a pretty piece." And I don't think the flowers are necessarily like normally pretty. They're a bit loud. They're a little bit like strong, but I do think they're pretty also. And I think that's a good thing.
I love, why don't we bring pretty back?
It's true.
Bringing pretty back, like the bringing sexy back. Let's bring pretty
Yes,
back.
bring
I don't,
pretty back. I mean, in beauty, and it's okay to like something because it's pretty. Everybody's got their thing, but this is
right.
what I needed in my life. What's interesting is I found that so many people related to it and needed it
Yeah.
and wanted it in their life.
Yeah. No, I think that's amazing. It makes me think about meditation, because in meditation, you're really, in some ways, trying to raise your vibration, to use
Mhm.
that phraseology. So tell me a little bit about your meditation practice, because you mentioned it early, so it must be important to you.
Well, I'm very ADD, and so I tried to meditate through different things on my own forever. And then I found this guy called Sam Harris. Do you know who he is?
I don't.
He is a neuroscientist. He writes about meditation. He spent a lot of his 20s meditating with Buddhists,
Mhm.
and he describes meditation. He's got a waking up series. It's the only thing that ever taught me what meditation was his explaining it because he
Yeah.
explains it in a practical way instead of a wooey like woo, get in touch and using very abstract words. He basically says your mind does this. This is what it does. This is how to calm it down. This is why it's happening. And I thought, oh my God, this is great. And he had an introductory course that was maybe 10 minutes a day. And
Perfect.
it's the only thing that ever worked for me. It really helped. I'm still not good at meditating on my own. I use his app and it really helped a lot. I also I'm a yoga instructor that doesn't
Nice.
teach. So that helps too, because
Yeah.
I was always very physical. I actually had this great doctor in Seattle who was an MD who worked with these naturopaths, and she said, "Your ADD really worked for you for so many years because you got to be the stay-at-home mother." So there's nothing wrong with that. It's just that my brain works in a different way.
Mhm.
And she said the reason it starts to be a problem later in life was because I used that ADD energy towards worry and sadness and mostly worry, actually,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
trauma after my children's father died. Yoga really helps, and that's a form of meditation.
It is.
And I feel, I'm very physical. I love to exercise, I love to walk, I love to hike. But when I tell people I do yoga, I really do it half for my head, at least half of my reason I'm doing yoga is for my brain to calm it down.
Yeah. I think that's a really intelligent way. I was having a talk with Stephen Cope, who's pretty big at Kripalu and
Mhm.
has been a yoga aficionado and a psychologist and so forth. And he said, that it was the way for him to kind of downregulate his system, and he really thinks that most people should do yoga and meditation. He's like, he tells all these 40-year-olds to do it, and what happens is people go to yoga to start in fitness, right? They want to get fit, and what pandemic has done is kind of made everybody focus on these hot yoga classes and not the meditative, benefits, and that's really where the gold is in the meditative benefits.
Yes. I did my first yoga class when I was 11 because I grew up in kind of a hippie town in Amherst, Massachusetts.
Nice.
And then I became a yoga instructor a few years ago. I went to Bali because I've always been doing it. And then I came back and took another course in Seattle. And I mostly took those courses for me.
Yeah.
And then I used some of that stuff actually to teach, because I teach kids sometimes,
Nice.
art. And I'm using some of the things I learned in yoga to be how to be a good yoga teacher in my classes with children, because it's so much about communication. The yoga that I do like is not Bikram, but it is a core yoga class, not at a gym, but I found some amazing place here in Jersey City, where I'm living now, because my children live here. I moved out of Manhattan. It's amazing. It's got a spiritual part to it, but it's a good workout. They're hard to find something that really combines them. I could probably use like yin yoga to sit there.
But it's hard to do.
It's hard for me to do.
It's really hard to do. I always tell a story about the restorative yoga class I took right in the midst of my divorce on a Thanksgiving day, thinking, oh, it would be a really great thing. Worst thing in the world that I ever could have done, to sit there that long.
Get it. I understand it.
I
Because
lost
you
it.
get with your feelings.
Oh, yeah. And I had absolutely no tools to do it at that
Yes.
time. I love what you did with your mind at that time. You were creating something that you had to actually stitch a piece by piece. See, that is keeping, active, but
Yes.
not taking on something really big, and also not sitting completely silent. You found something. And I wrote. I went right into writing. And especially when I was dealing with the hardest scenes of my memoir, which is my first book, my writing coach told me you have to write it longhand, and I hated that because I really like to type. And she said the best thing you
Love
can
that.
do is with your hands, because you're going to let go of that energy. And what you did with the sewing was doing that. It was letting go of the energy. It's fascinating that you picked that and you just instinctively went there.
Yes, but I've always been doing something with my hands. Do you know what?
Yeah.
I think the Shakers who say it,
Yeah.
they say hands to work, heart to God,
Yeah. Yeah.
because they were the
Yeah.
ones that made all the furniture.
That's right. And I love shaker
Hands to
furniture.
work, heart to God.
Yeah.
So,
And it's truth, though. I think
yes, it
it,
is.
I mean, it can go to extremes, I guess, but
Of course it is.
in those early days, you need something to kind of keep moving. At
Yes.
least that's how I found it.
Yes, because it's hard to just say, okay, I'm going to meditate and think and really sit with my thoughts. You can't.
No, no, thank you. No, thank
No,
you. Not right
thank
now.
you. No, thank you. Exactly. That you just want to numb them. You just don't want to look at them. And I was lucky enough to have children
Hmm.
to really keep me busy. So I
Hmm.
didn't
And
have
grounded.
to live with them. Yes. And I had to be very grounded. That's exactly it. I had to show up
Yeah.
for them. I had to be there for them. And yeah, they are,
Ev-
they really, they're very,
Everything.
they are kind of, no,
They
they are,
everything.
yeah,
And they know it, right?
they do.
They know
Yes.
it.
And it's girls, all girls too.
Yeah, I
So,
have that too. I have that too. So maybe I'd like to ask one question about Misha and your friendship and how that
yes.
helped you through these times, because I so enjoyed speaking with her. So so maybe tell me a little bit about that and how you've supported each other in your art and life.
I think that I was living on another coast when, I went through the most trauma, but actually we help each other now,
Hmm.
because really what we both did is we really focused on our families for the longest time. So I met her when I was 13, and that's kind of a great time because, and to still be friends with someone. I
Yeah,
know
it's
Misha's,
incredible.
I knew her parents, I
Hmm.
knew her brothers, she knew my family, I knew the house that she lived in. I saw exactly, I really understand who she is. And so all of a sudden life happens and all of a sudden we're 65. So
Yeah.
we basically say, hey, wait, how did we get here? We're really supporting each other now. And maybe since I've moved back to this coast, I would say
Hmm.
when maybe that was in 2020, I moved back to this coast. And that's really when we connected again, physically connected, because we were
Yeah.
close to each other. It was always talking to her and seeing her as much as I could, but that doesn't happen all the time in these years when you're raising kids.
No.
And then when the kids grew up, hers are a little bit older than me, she was really able to focus on her illustrations and then on writing stories. And then she's really can now focus on being Misha Archer, the children's book writer and illustrator. And what happened to me is I did something very similar. So we're just right now, we're just these great cheerleaders for each other.
It's so
Really
nice.
recognizing and also saying, I think it was those years of taking care of our children that really maybe added to this. I don't think that I was ready, and I don't regret also any of it. I felt very lucky. She was working at the time also. I wasn't working, but she was a teacher. And then she worked as a carpenter with her husband for a while. But she was very family focused and not focused as much on her artwork. Of course, she was always doing things like I was. So it's amazing. We just went to India together. And what I realized is that part of my interest in India, well, I had gone 12 years ago. I've always loved the idea of India. And I think part of it was sparked when I was 13 and I met Misha's family because she had spent a couple of years in her childhood in India. And I was just intrigued by this. Her mother was an artist. I was intrigued by the Indian things that they had around. Her father had Indian friends. And we lived in a college town, so there were people of all, from all over the place there. But I didn't realize that until recently. I think I really realized that maybe that at first sparked my interest in India. I saw something on Instagram about this artist residency. I said, we've got to go. And it was just sort of a crazy whim. All of a sudden, we have time in our lives. We have a little bit of money to do this. We never would have had this before. We just had the most amazing time at this artist residency in Rajasthan and being really supportive and giggling all the time and talking about things that we knew when we were 13 and talking about something that happened yesterday. And I feel like the conversation started the minute we met at her daughter's house in Brooklyn. And I don't think we stopped the conversation until we said goodbye.
What a gift.
It was great. This particular residency called Farm Studio India, it just all came together. It was very magic. I think that women, because we've had to be so fluid and we've had to figure things out with life with children, we're both just wanting to do the next adventure. And so just the idea of us being in this little village, like in the back of a tuk-tuk, we would look at each other and we'd say, most people would hate that. Who do you know that would like this? I don't think, and then she'd look at me, I don't think anyone would like this that I know, because it was sort of rough. It's basically camping. This was not,
But not glamping at all.
And not even glamping.
Well, I think one of the things that I wonder if this resonates with you is that after our kids are grown, it's our time. And I wouldn't change a moment of the time with my kids, but I know there's women that are struggling kind of with who they are after their kids are grown and after that time of their life is over. And maybe as we close here, what would you say to them about that?
Take all that energy that you put in your children, because that's a lot of energy. Think of what you did, and send them off nicely. My daughters live nearby. I want to see them all the time.
Same.
But for your children's sake,
yes,
have a full life so that they don't have to be worried about you. And so for me, I think that's what Misha and I were talking about. What do people do who don't have this? I would say you have to be brave. And if your children were your life, then do it for your children. Go explore, be a yoga instructor, or start writing. Do that thing. Because you know what? As we're older, I don't care what anyone thinks about me anymore. It's just, well, okay, now I don't care. I'm not 14 where I'm really worried that I'm not wearing the right shirt in school.
That's right.
Or someone's going to say something to me or whatever. No, we have such freedom. There's that funny movie or that TV series, Frankie and Johnny. Is it?
Frankie and Gracie. Gracie, is it
Gracie,
Frankie and
Gracie and Frankie?
Yeah, Gracie and Frankie. Yeah.
I saw, I think, the first season and then got busy. But Lily Tomlin says to Jane Fonda, let's go to the store. We can steal things. And Jane Fonda says, what are you talking about? And she said, oh, we're older women. People don't see us anymore. And so there is sort of a gift to that, meaning
there is. There absolutely is.
Yes. I thought it was just the most brilliant line. you can't be afraid of anything at this age. Believe me, of course, I have traumas and fears of things like my finances or my children's health or things like that. But you can't be afraid of putting yourself out there and trying something new. No one's looking at you, by the way. That's sort of the truth. People
Yeah.
are very self-involved, and take that to your advantage. I think I learned in one of my yoga teacher trainings, the one in Bali, that to not share your gift, to not try something new, to not put yourself out there is actually a selfish way of being. If you have
Yes, it
something, if
is.
you have a gift, you really should be. It's up to you to share that gift.
It's almost a sin not to.
Yes, yes, you need to be generous with what you have.
And that is a great way to end a podcast.
It was really fun, and thank you so much. This
Oh
is
my
really
gosh, it was just so much fun and pretty. It was beautiful
pretty.
background the whole time and pretty. Thank you so, so much. That's all for today. If you want to learn more about Judith and her work, those links will be in the show notes. Thank you so much for listening. I hope this episode was helpful. If it was, please subscribe, drop a review, or share it with your friends and family. That's the best way to get it in the hands of those who may benefit. And if my daughters, Sienna and Sylvia, are listening, I just want you to know how proud I am of you, and I love you so much. Bye now.